The morning began like any other inside the towering glass building that housed the headquarters of Harkins International. The sun was only just beginning to climb above the skyline, scattering golden light across the polished marble floors. Employees shuffled in with coffee cups and folders tucked under their arms, still shaking off the sleep of dawn. For a brief moment the air felt almost calm, until the sound of thunder erupted from the top floor. "Nobody silences me." The voice crashed down the hall like a whip. It belonged to Mr. Adrian Harkins, the CEO himself, a man known more for his fury than for his leadership. His fist came down on the mahogany conference table, rattling pens and scattering papers. Those seated near him flinched, while those farther away froze in place. His temper was legendary, but this morning, it burned hotter than usual. People lowered their eyes, pretending to focus on their notes, hoping not to attract attention. No one dared meet his gaze. 4 years he had ruled the company with fear, silencing complaints, firing those who questioned him and crushing anyone who stood in his way. And then, as if fate had chosen the most unlikely moment, the door at the far end of the hall creaked open. A new figure entered quietly, Elena, the newest member of the cleaning staff. She carried only a broom and a bucket, her uniform plain and simple, yet her posture straight and calm. She wasn't part of the meeting, nor did she intend to be. Her only goal was to finish her work unnoticed, to pass silently through the storm. But storms rarely allow silence. Adrian Harkins spotted her as she crossed the hall. His eyes narrowed, sharp with disdain. The room stilled. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to vanish. "You." His voice boomed, dripping with venom. "Who do you think you are, walking in here with that look on your face?" Elena stopped mid-step, the handle of the broom still resting against her palm. She turned her head slowly, not in defiance, not in fear, but simply to face the man who had spoken. Her gaze was steady, unshaken. She said nothing. That silence, that calm, unbothered silence, enraged him. "This is my company," he roared, pointing at her as though she had committed an unforgivable crime. "Here people respect me. Here my word is law. And if you don't understand that, you will learn it the hard way." A murmur rippled through the room, quickly suppressed as employees pressed their lips together. They knew better than to intervene. Everyone knew the consequences of defiance: instant dismissal. Adrian Harkins had destroyed careers in a single phone call, leaving families broken and futures stolen. Yet Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Adrian's steps echoed as he marched across the floor until he stood only inches from her face. His suit was perfectly pressed, his cologne sharp, his expression filled with arrogance. "We hired you to clean, not to strut around here as though you belong. Remember your place, girl. People like you have no voice in a company like mine." For a long moment, no one breathed. The weight of his words pressed down like chains on everyone in the room. Many employees lowered their eyes. A secretary twisted her hands together nervously. A young intern's face flushed with embarrassment, though she dared not speak. And still Elena stood calm. Her eyes were steady. Her grip on the broom tightened slightly, not as a weapon but as if drawing strength from it. Adrian's lips curled into a cruel smile. He had expected tears or stammering or at least submission. Instead he was met with silence. His rage grew. "You may think your silence protects you," he spat, "but here silence is weakness. I will break it. I will break you." He slammed his palm against the desk beside them, the sound sharp as a gunshot. Papers flew to the ground. Several employees gasped. A junior manager nearly dropped his notebook. And then, at last, Elena spoke. Her voice was steady, clear, and without fear. "You're wrong, sir." The words were simple, but the effect was electric. Head snapped upward. Eyes widened. A stunned hush swept across the hall. Adrian blinked in disbelief. No one had spoken to him like that in years. "You may have money," Elena continued softly, "and you may command authority here. But none of that gives you the right to treat me like garbage." Her words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through the entire office. For the first time, someone had broken the silence that had shackled them all. Adrian's face turned crimson. His voice erupted even louder than before. "What did you say to me?" he bellowed, his neck veins straining. "Nobody challenges me in my company. Nobody, and certainly not a cleaning woman like you." He jabbed a finger at her chest. "With one call I can make sure you never work anywhere again. I can end your career before it begins. You'll be nothing. Less than nothing." Elena did not move. She did not blink. And then, with a gesture so small yet so powerful, she lifted one finger to her lips. Silence. The room froze. Adrian's chest heaved with fury. He stumbled half a step backward, not from fear but from sheer disbelief. No one had ever dared to silence him. "You dare to shush me?" he hissed, his voice cracking with rage. "Do you have any idea who I am?" But the seed of doubt had been planted. All around, employees exchanged glances. Some were nervous. Some were shocked. But a few, just a few, had the faintest glimmer of hope in their eyes. For the first time, Adrian's power felt uncertain. And Elena, broom still in hand, stood taller than anyone else in the room. The silence after Elena's gesture weighed heavier than steel. Every heartbeat in the room could be heard. For a man like Adrian Harkins, silence was intolerable, especially when it was not his own. His nostrils flared as if he were a bull about to charge. "You think you can silence me?" he spat, his voice low but shaking with fury. "I am Adrian Harkins. I built this empire with my own hands. I've crushed men far stronger than you, and you," he jabbed at Elena with each word, "are nothing. Nothing but a broom in a hallway." Elena's eyes did not move from his. "Come, clear. Unafraid." Her silence spread like a slow fire through the room. Employees glanced at one another, uneasy, wondering what would happen next. For years, fear had been their prison. But Elena's calm presence felt like a key slipped into the lock. Adrian, trembling with anger, slammed his fist again on the table. "Answer me," he bellowed. "Tell me who you think you are before I end your miserable job right here, right now." Finally she spoke. "I am a worker. I am a human being. And I am not your punching bag." A gasp rippled across the room. It wasn't just what she said, it was the way she said it. Her voice carried no shouting, no trembling. Just a steady truth, as if she were naming something obvious that everyone else had forgotten. Adrian's jaw tightened. He gave a cruel laugh, sharp and cold. "You think your dignity matters here? I'll show you how quickly dignity disappears when I make a single call to blacklist your name. You'll never work again. Not in this city. Not in this country. Your dignity won't pay your rent." He leaned closer, his breath hot with rage. "By the time I'm done, you'll beg me to let you back in as a beggar at the door." The words echoed. For a moment, it seemed Elena might falter. But she didn't. Instead, she tightened her grip on the broom, holding it like a banner. She met his gaze and spoke softly. "Before you try to silence me, make sure I have nothing to say to the board about what happens behind these doors." The words fell like a stone dropped in water, sending shockwaves across the room. Every head turned. Employees' mouths parted in disbelief. Adrian froze, his face paling for just a second before flushing red again. "What did you say?" His voice cracked like glass under pressure. "What do you know?" The employees looked around, whispering. Fear mingled with something new, curiosity, even hope. For years, people had whispered about corruption, favoritism, and shady dealings. But no one had dared mention it aloud. Until now. Elena didn't answer his question. She only held his gaze, calm and unbroken. That silence was more terrifying than any accusation. Adrian roared, his voice breaking the air. "Do you think a woman like you can threaten me? Do you think you can stand here and make me tremble? You're out of your mind." He turned sharply toward the employees, searching for reassurance. "Look at her. A cleaner, acting like she runs the place. She has nothing. She is nothing. And if any of you think she speaks for you, remember who pays your salaries. Remember that without me, you are dust." He expected nods of agreement. He expected silence. What he didn't expect was a voice. A small, trembling voice, but a voice nonetheless. "She's not lying." The words came from the corner of the room. A young secretary, thin and pale, clutching a stack of papers to her chest, had stepped forward. Her knees shook, her hands trembled, but her voice carried something sharp, truth. Adrian's head snapped toward her like a predator sensing prey. His eyes blazed. "You," he snarled. "Do you dare to challenge me too? Do you dare?" The secretary swallowed hard, but she didn't step back. "I've seen it. I've lived it. We all have." She raised the papers in her arms, her knuckles white from the grip. "And I have proof." The murmurs rose louder, like a tide rushing against the walls. Employees who had been frozen for years began to shift, their eyes flicking between Elena and the secretary. Something was breaking. Something old, rotten, and long feared. Adrian lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers from the secretary's hands. "Give me that," he barked, his voice cracking. His hand swiped the air. But before he could seize them, something extraordinary happened. Two employees, men who had sat silently through years of abuse, moved. Instinctively. They stepped between Adrian and the secretary, blocking his reach. The room froze again. Adrian's eyes widened. His chest heaved. "What are you doing?" he roared. "Move. I will fire you both right now." But the men didn't move. Their jaws were clenched, their eyes steady. And then, as if a dam had broken, others rose. A cluster of workers shifted closer, forming a barrier around the secretary. Some stood tall, others nervous, but all resolute. The CEO, who had always walked into rooms expecting silence and obedience, suddenly found himself surrounded by defiance. Adrian's face contorted, his voice hoarse with fury. "Do you fools understand what you're doing? You're risking everything. I built your lives. I can tear them apart." But his words no longer carried the same weight. They hung in the air, desperate, like a man clinging to power already slipping from his fingers. The secretary raised her trembling hands higher, clutching the papers like a torch in the darkness. Elena's calm presence at the center gave her strength. She looked to Elena, and Elena gave her the smallest of nods. It was enough. The secretary's voice steadied. "We're not afraid of you anymore." The room erupted into murmurs, louder this time. Not whispers of fear but of courage. For the first time in years, the office walls echoed with something Adrian Harkins had never expected: resistance. He took a staggering step back, his authority visibly cracking. His eyes darted between his employees, searching desperately for one face of loyalty, one sign of submission. But all he saw was a sea of eyes, no longer bowed, no longer silent. And in that moment he realized something he had never allowed himself to believe. He was losing control. Adrian's fury boiled over. His voice, once a weapon that commanded silence, now sounded desperate. He spun toward the door and barked an order loud enough to shake the walls. "Guards, get in here now." Within moments, 2 security officers pushed through the glass doors, their boots thudding against the floor. They were large, muscular men in black uniforms, and for years they had obeyed Adrian without question. Their presence alone was usually enough to crush dissent. The CEO pointed at Elena, his finger trembling with rage. "Remove that woman immediately. And anyone who dares to defend her, fire them, throw them out, I don't care how. I'll grind their futures to dust." The guards glanced at each other. Their brows furrowed. Something about the scene didn't add up. They saw the secretary clutching documents with both hands, the circle of employees shielding her, and Elena standing tall with nothing but a broom. Around them, the entire office was murmuring, whispers swelling into something louder. The taller guard shifted uncomfortably. "What exactly is going on here, sir?" he asked in a low, steady voice. Adrian's face twisted. "What's going on is insubordination," he snapped. "I pay your salaries too, remember that? Do your jobs or you'll be out on the street with the rest of them." But the hesitation in the guard's eyes betrayed something Adrian wasn't ready to face. His power was no longer absolute. Elena stepped forward slowly, her broom still in hand, but her posture regal, not like a cleaner, but like someone carrying a crown of quiet dignity. She looked directly at the guards. "What's going on," she said calmly, "is years of silence. Years of humiliation. Years of fear that end today." The words carried across the room, cutting through the air with the force of truth. The murmurs grew louder, filling the space with a charge that no one could contain. The guards didn't move. Their hesitation stretched into silence. And then the sound of heavy doors slamming open broke the moment like thunder. Everyone turned. At the far end of the room, flanked by 2 executives, the chairman of the board of directors strode in. His face was carved with age and authority, his silver hair slicked neatly back, his sharp suit unwrinkled despite the chaos unfolding. His cold eyes swept across the room, taking in the scene. Behind him, the executives carried themselves like judges about to preside over a trial. The employees froze. Some felt fear rise again, others hope. Adrian straightened instantly, forcing a smile across his flushed face. "Gentlemen," he exclaimed, his voice too loud, too eager. "This is not what it looks like. I was merely dealing with troublemakers trying to tarnish my reputation." The chairman didn't answer. His eyes landed on the secretary clutching the papers, her hands shaking but refusing to let go. Slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand. "Give me those," he said. The secretary hesitated, her knuckles white, but then she stepped forward and placed the stack of documents into his grip. Her head bowed, but her voice whispered firmly, "It's all true." The chairman flipped through the pages. His eyebrows drew together as he scanned the lines. Each page darkened his expression. The executives behind him peered over his shoulder, their frowns deepening. Adrian's fake smile faltered. He reached forward, desperate. Those papers, they're nothing. What? Forged by disgruntled workers trying to get back at me. You know how people are. Always jealous of success. Silence. The chairman's single word cut sharper than a blade. Adrian froze mid-sentence. The room followed with complete silence, as if the building itself held its breath. The chairman looked up slowly, his gaze locking on Adrian like a hawk eyeing prey. His voice was cold, measured, but it carried the weight of command. These are not lies. These are records. Contracts altered. Accounts falsified. Names manipulated. Proof of intimidation, harassment, and fraud. He lowered the papers. All signed by you. The murmurs exploded into gasps. Employees exchanged wide-eyed stares. Some covered their mouths. Years of suspicion had just been confirmed. Adrian's face turned a sickly shade of pale. No, that's impossible. Those documents are misinterpreted. You can't prove anything. But his voice lacked its old thunder. For the first time, the employees dared to step forward. One after another, voices rose. He screamed at me for months. He forged my overtime sheets. He threatened my family. He silenced us all with fear. The voices piled onto one another, a storm breaking free after years of being trapped behind walls. The sound of truth filled the room, and Adrian's desperate cries were drowned out. No! Adrian shouted, his voice cracking. Stop this. I am your boss. I made you. You owe me your loyalty. But the words sounded hollow. The crowd no longer belonged to him. Their fear had turned to fire. The chairman raised his hand and the voices hushed. His gaze cut back to Adrian. This, he said slowly, is unacceptable. It will all be investigated immediately. Adrian stumbled forward, his pride disintegrating. His words turned from arrogance to begging. Please listen to me. I've built this company from nothing. I've dedicated my life. They're twisting everything. You can't take this away from me. But the chairman's face was stone. The executive's eyes were knives. The employees' voices, once silent, were now louder than any single man. The walls that had protected Adrian for years were crumbling, and he knew it. The boardroom was silent, suffocating. Every eye was fixed on Adrian Harkins, once a man who filled every corner of the company with his voice, now trembling like a shadow of himself. His expensive suit clung to him as though it too wanted to escape. Sweat glistened across his brow. The chairman of the board straightened, holding the papers like evidence at a trial. His voice was steady, carrying judgment that needed no elaboration. Pick up your things, he said coldly. You are finished here. Effective immediately. The words slammed into Adrian harder than any fist. He staggered back, his mouth opening and closing without sound. He looked toward the guards, searching for loyalty but found none. He looked to the executives, but they stared through him. And when his eyes turned desperately to the employees, he found not fear but something far worse, freedom. You can't do this, he stammered, his voice breaking. This is my company. I built this empire with my hands. You're nothing without me. The chairman's gaze was cold steel. You built nothing but fear. This company belongs to its people, and they have endured your tyranny for far too long. Now they are free. The guards stepped forward. For years they had escorted others out of the building at Adrian's orders. Now they took him by the arms. He jerked against them, but his resistance was feeble. You can't fire me. You'll regret this. I'll destroy all of you. But his threats sounded like the cries of a man already defeated. His voice, once thunder, was now only a storm collapsing in on itself. As the guards dragged him toward the door, the employees didn't jeer, didn't laugh, didn't even clap. Instead, they stood in silence, watching the tyrant stripped of his crown. There was no triumph in the air, only a deep exhale of relief, like chains falling to the floor. The doors closed behind him. The echo lingered, and with it, years of oppression seemed to fade away. For a long moment, no one moved. The room felt strange, lighter, as though the very walls had been waiting for this day. Then, slowly, one sound broke the stillness, a sob. The young secretary who had raised her trembling voice earlier clutched her papers to her chest and wept openly. She wasn't crying from fear but from release. The weight she had carried for years was gone. Her voice had been heard. Several colleagues moved to her side, resting gentle hands on her shoulders, offering quiet comfort. Others turned toward Elena, their eyes wide with gratitude, awe, and something more, respect. She stood where it all began, broom in hand, posture calm and steady. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't raged. She hadn't needed to. Dignity had been her weapon, and it had proved sharper than any blade. One by one, employees approached her. Some whispered thank you, their voices raw with emotion. Others simply nodded, unable to find words, but their eyes spoke volumes. For the first time, they were no longer employees crushed by fear, they were people standing upright. The chairman's voice broke the quiet again. He addressed the room, his tone grave but resolute. What happened today must never be repeated. There will be a full investigation. Every abuse, every falsified record, every broken contract will be uncovered. This company will be rebuilt, not on fear but on respect. The employees nodded, some with tears in their eyes. They knew change was coming, though none of them had dared to imagine it before. Elena lowered her broom slowly and leaned it against the wall. She didn't smile. She didn't bask in victory. Instead, she lifted her chin and spoke, her words carrying softly but reaching every ear in the room. You never know who stands in front of you, she said. Appearances deceive. But dignity and respect should never be negotiable. Her words etched themselves into the walls like scripture. The office was silent again, but this silence was different. Not the silence of fear but the silence of listening, of a truth sinking deep. The employees exchanged looks, some nodding, others still processing what had unfolded. They had witnessed not only the fall of a tyrant but also the rise of courage in its simplest form. A woman with nothing but her dignity refusing to bow. The young secretary stepped toward Elena, tears still glistening on her cheeks. Her voice trembled, but her words were filled with admiration. You gave us back our voices. I'll never forget this day. Elena touched her shoulder gently, shaking her head. No, she said softly. You gave yourself your voice. I only reminded you it was there. The secretary broke into a fresh wave of tears, but this time they were tears of strength. Around them the workers began to talk more freely. Stories poured out, of nights unpaid, of insults hurled, of ideas stolen. What had once been whispers in the dark were now spoken aloud, released into the air without fear. The office that had been a cage was becoming a place of truth. The chairman and his executives remained, listening, recording, nodding. For once, the employees were not just background noise to the machinery of profit. They were the heart of the company, finally beating again. And Elena? She quietly picked up her broom again. Her work wasn't glamorous. Her name wouldn't appear in newspapers. She would not be celebrated in grand speeches or decorated with medals. But none of that mattered. She had stood where no one else dared. She had spoken when silence was expected. And she had proven that power does not always roar. Sometimes, it whispers, calm and unyielding. By the time the day ended, the story of what had happened spread through every floor of the building. By evening, it was whispered in cafes, texted across the city, murmured at dinner tables. Not the downfall of Adrian Harkins, not the firing of a tyrant, but the story of a cleaner named Elena, who had reminded an entire company of its soul. In the weeks to come, investigations would unravel layers of corruption. Trials would follow, reputations would crumble, and changes would ripple through the structure of power. But those were headlines for another day. What would remain, what no one would ever forget, was the moment a woman with nothing but a broom silenced a man who thought he could never be silenced. And the quiet lesson she left behind. Respect is not given by position or wealth. It is earned by humanity. And once people remember their dignity, no tyrant can ever take it away again.